Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second day of the online training, mental training in sports. Yesterday we have Cristina Rolo. Today we have Dave. Dave, now is your time. Good evening.
Good evening, Tiago. Thank you for welcoming us to speak about mental training. Yesterday was Cristina, my partner's chance to explain the more academic and details about the mechanics of mental training. For those that are just joining us today, let us introduce ourselves. I'm Dave De Haan. I'm an ex-performance player. My sport was basketball. My passion was always tennis. I was educated in psychology in America. During my time in America, I played Division I college basketball, which I also received some form of mental training, but nowhere near the level that is development now. My partner, Cristina Rolo, Dr. Cristina Rolo, also got her education in the United States at University of Greensboro. She was more of an all-round athlete. She's a specialist in sports psychology, and she has a PhD in exercise science. Together we form Rolo Mental Coaching. We started in 2005, and we have been going strong for the duration of these 15 years, gathering in the field experience, not just conference knowledge, I usually call it, but hands-on material that we are here now ready to share with you. But before I want to get started, I want to really invite the audience to participate. So if there is a question or a comment, or I'm saying something that makes you doubt something, go ahead, put it in the chat. Tiago will interrupt me at a given time to just take a pause, and maybe you would like me to elaborate on something a little bit more. We've got time, so we could do that. Also, I'd like to advise you to have some hydration with you, to hydrate yourself, give yourself plenty of nutrition, because this subject that we're talking about is sometimes very complex. It's so simple that I'm trying to explain, but it gets complex. So give yourself chances and move around if you need to move around, so we can have your optimal focus. We have received some questions from yesterday, but before we get there, I would like to share first what we promised that we would start with. We had an overall question about what is the process really about mental training. You hear it in professional sports. Commentators even say, oh, his mind is not in the game, or he's not mentally there. So it's becoming very aware to the public that mentality and mental toughness is very important. But besides people knowing that it's really important, the how to, what is the process, it's not really familiar. So how do you train mentally? Where does it start? So first of all, it starts with having a wish to be better than you were before, and a want. And where we get to from there, and eventually we get to how and where do we do this? Well, it starts with an intake conversation with a specialist in sports psychology or a sports psychologist, or a mental coach. I don't really like the term mental coach, because it's actually trying to get out of the mind to let yourself be able to play. So I like more calling ourselves a high performance coach or enhancement psychology coach. The process starts in an evaluation where we do an intake conversation when we assess chemistry and compatibility, which is very important. We find it the utmost necessity to be able to vibe well with the person that we're working with. So it doesn't always mean that when we do an intake with somebody that we will work with them. They might not want to work with us, or we have the added advantage of Cristina and I both being very different professionals. So they can choose, they have more options. But usually in the intake process, that's where you kind of get to know each other. And when you get into a process for acceptance. The chemistry is good, your compatibility is good, and the needs are feeling good. So, and then you start assessing the goals of the client. Sometimes they are goals that they believe is going to help them perform better. And then we also will give our little salt and pepper opinion about what we believe could also add to those goals by adding other goals, which we call process goals. Usually clients come to us with end goals, result goals, which are very important. You need to know when you get in your car in the morning, you're going to the job, you want to remember that you want to go to your end destination, but you don't want to forget putting your clothes on, right? So the process goals are very important also. From there, when we are starting the process of reaching the goals, you need tools. You need to learn to assess what processes are already established. Usually we work with other coaches that already done a tremendous job in technical, whatever player it is a tennis player, soccer player, judoka, it doesn't matter. Their technique, usually they've been playing the sport for many, many years already. So we like to have things that are already intact and then functional. We like to not touch that. We like to keep that in place. Then we also want to establish what processes are faulty or they need development. They need more assessment. For example, some youthful player might want to increase his patience and discipline. And how do you get there? Well, we are a big advocate of starting from scratch. When you have a player that has never been in mental training, first he needs to understand what is mental training. Christina touched on it a little bit yesterday, but for those who are just joining us now, mental training is actually a process of systematic application of mental skills training. So this is not just one talk. Tonight you're going to be hearing me talking about certain tools, but just knowing about a tool one time doesn't give you the effect. Just like going one time to the gym will not make your muscles grow. So it has to become part of your process. Later, I'll share a video with you about a very famous player who's now deemed the greatest of all time. An old video of when he was starting to become like a really good player, where you can see some parts of the mental process tools working and some are not working yet. So I'll get back to that on the process. But observation is also very, very important part of doing a professional job. When we usually get hired to work with a team or a player, we say, well, we don't only work in a classroom or we don't only do online. We want to see you in action. We want to see your body language. We want to see how you move. We want to see what you do in between points. We've noticed that in our work with our colleagues in technical, for example, department, they are more focused on when the game is played. And that's why tennis is very interesting, because there's time of hitting the balls in between points. And we notice that we are more attentive to when they're not playing or they're not hitting balls than when they are hitting balls. And when they hit the ball is 20% of the game. 80% of the time spent is not hitting the ball, but that's still part of the game. And a lot of top level players mention that that is the area where they can get the mental game. There's a game within a game. I'm sure people have heard many movies about sports. There's a mental game inside every game. And if you dominate also the time spent when you're not hitting balls, creating optimal focus, for example, or that you're really feeling good in your game, that you can produce your level of play, then you can probably have a significant outcome on the end result, which is winning. We are all playing to win. What I would like to get to now is to say, because the whole process also ends up with what we promise. In Roland Mental Coaching, we have a promise that we will lead towards autonomy. Some coaching, I sometimes like to remind people, like, we want him or her to be able to make decisions on their own quickly and instinctively. So we need to try to know when to speak, when to coach, and not have the player ask us what they should do, because that's towards dependency. So in the coaching process of role and mental coaching, we try to always gear towards autonomy. And the other promise is confidentiality, of course, which is still an area of psychology, or whatever they share with us, any process, we have to maintain that for ourselves. So this is kind of, in a nutshell, really basically explained how the process is of how to start in mental training process. Christina and I have, yesterday was mentioned already, yes, that we released a book, Mental Training in Tennis, Practical Strategies for Success. It's now available on Amazon, which has the tools after every chapter available how to practice these things off court and on court. Why did we do that? Because in our research, we realized that there was many motivational books, very inspirational, but the only book that we found that was actually handing tools in the end was a book that was written, I think, in 1973 by Timothy Galloway. A lot of people know it is The Inner Game of Tennis. Wonderful revelation, because he was the first one to divide the person in two selves. I'm a big fan of that because I use it in my coaching always. We've elaborated a little bit more on his knowledge in our book. We have designed exercises off court and on court to benefit the coaches and the players that are wanting to be also working in the area of mental training, but precisely what you want to train, step by step, easy to do. A 10-year-old can read the book, so we were able to take all the scientific language out of it and make it practical. Christina, I would like to, because we have a lot of questions from yesterday. Do you mind that we just answer those questions?
Yes, we can.
If there's questions about what I just said about the process, go ahead, put it in the chat. Tiago will stop me and he will allow me to alleviate any doubts to make it clear.
So the
first question.
And by the way, thank you, Tiago de Loop, for sending the questions from the participants.
Yes, and the participant, thanks for contributing to making this even more interesting. I always love the interaction from the audience.
So the questions are in Portuguese. I'm going to translate some of them in the translation. It's not totally clear, but perhaps...
Just lay it on me. Lay it on me. Give me the questions.
So the first question is about how to manage failure or in success, and if you can give some examples, some practical examples of...
Okay, how to deal... The question is how to deal with failure and practical examples, how I coached towards that. Well, failure is something that actually is not existent in our coaching process. We are big fans of when we don't win, we learn. And a professional player is constantly working on his craft. You look at one of your most famous soccer players, which I have tremendous respect for, Ronaldo, is constantly working on his craft. He's reached the top of the top, and he's still working on individual little details. And but take Roger Federer or any of the big names, they're winning tournaments, and the next day they're practicing on something that they didn't like very much about the game. So failure is also a perception. So we work with our players and coaches to have an alternate perception of success. What is success? Some people find success making a huge amount of money, or getting really high up in the ranking, and having sponsors and adore you by media and crowds, having fame. But success can also be meeting goals. We work with goals. We make intermediate goals, practical goals, process goals, and leading as a result in end goals. End goals we don't really have control of. So what we do is we coach people towards realizing what is the process. And if we are working with somebody who just started doing mental training, and something comes to mind, I was used to working in the ATP area, which is the top level of the tennis. And then when my player of 6 years retired, I decided to start working with a player that's playing on a little bit lower level. It's called the ITFs, the futures, which is going to be the future names that you're going to be seeing. Which is slightly different, and I had to adjust. But in our process, the dealing with the pressures was the same. But I had to adjust from how we worked. In the ITF, a lot of coaches are expected to do everything. And I felt really bad for some of the coaches that have 4 or 5 players traveling with them, and they were supposed to do the mental training, the technical training, the tactical training, even sometimes giving diet advice, weight training. And when you're working in the top level, it's all specialists. When you are with a limited budget in an ITF players, they cannot always handle everything, coaches and also players. And therefore, it's even more important that your perception about failure is altered. So we make little goals. When I ask an ITF player to start playing ATP style, they're not going to be able to produce that for the full 2 hours that the match is. So we make a little bit intermediate goals. Like I usually ask, okay, how we practice today, I would like you to at least play your service games like this. And you swing full, you go full for your serves, and every ball that comes out of the bounce hit technique that we are working on, I want you to really see the ball, hit the ball. And right now, if some of those go out, that's fine. But I want to see the same assertiveness that you would see in practice and in competition, because role mental coaching makes no difference between practice or competition, because it's either all competition or it's all practice. Everything is a test. For me, if you are a potential candidate to become a champion, then your mind should be, I want to win everything. And winning you do in small steps, because if the player is able to play 3 games in the first set on the way that I would like him to start playing, and we reach that goal, that's a win. So to answer the question, you relay the process of what really failure is and what success is. And in general, people who only are fixated on the win or the money or the car that I'll get if I hit the hole in one. It's too much focused on a singular end result. So we alter the perception towards what is in our control. And that usually are process goals. Did I answer that question correctly, you think? If not, if you want more explanation about this area, I can talk hours about process goals. So lay it on me. Next question.
Okay. The second question is from a coach from an individual sport, and he asks, or he expresses that one of his greatest difficulties of his daily job is to manage the expectations of the parents of the athletes.
Very good question. Very good question, because this is something that we deal often when we are playing, working with youthful players. Sometimes we get called by parents, oh, please work with my child because I know you're awesome and you can make him an ATP player, which some of the myths that Christina explained yesterday. We are not miracle workers, we are not magic, and we cannot fix everything. We need the child to want to work with us, first of all. And sometimes I'm a parent myself, and I know I want the best for my child. And but sometimes the roles of parents and coaches need to be clearly defined. And I'm very proud to announce that Christina was part of the original foundation from the research they've done for a USTA program for parenting. They made an awesome questionnaire. We will share it later. Possibly we can put it in the links in the chat later, where you can find the questionnaire for parents to do an assessment of how well am I supporting my child, and you get an objective score. And some parents that thought they were pretty awesome parents for their athlete found out that actually they could improve on certain areas, and mainly it had to do with letting the coach do his job, because some parents were letting everything up to the coach, even the life skills and the parenting skills were due to the coach. But some parents were also coaches themselves, and they didn't realize that they were interfering in the professional coach that they hired in his job to be able to get his knowledge to the player. Some parents were actually talking during matches, and we had to tell them, it's like, this is not part of your role. Your role is a parent say, come on, and clap, and no instructions, no technical or tactical information. And a lot of players mentioned that they were embarrassed that their parents were saying something about the opponent, or the backhand is weak, and or even like in soccer, you hear parents shouting from the other side, and I love it. I went to a soccer field one time, and there was a big placca, or what you call it, a plate written, and they say, "Coach is coach, parents parents. So please be quiet and enjoy the match." And I was like, wow, this is basically what should be done right away. But some coaches are not assertive enough to, or they're afraid to lose their job, to tell the parents and to claim their position as coach to be able to do their job. Anxiety in players for having parents, because there was also a question about having your parents watch the match. Yeah, well, we've asked parents to actually come at half, come a little later, or sneak in and watch the match from the bleachers in the shade. If the player says that it's difficult for him to have his parents there, then simple, remove yourself, be humble, and allow yourself to. I have removed myself because I've had matches where the player said, you're sitting too close to the court, and I say, okay, I'll go sit in the bleachers, and I move. It has to do also with a little bit of ego, and I want to also address that in different cultures it's different, because we've been in Dubai, you've been in Netherlands, in Portugal, in America, and parenting is different. So whatever I'm saying, be sensitive to the culture where you are. Some people are open-minded to be adjusted as parents. I would always lead with, we want to do the best for your child, so let's have an open, honest conversation. What are my roles as a coach, and what are your roles as a parent? And let's separate these two really clearly, so we cannot get in any kind of conflict about this matter, and then you can get to performance.
Very good.
Next question.
The next question is also related to parenting and kind of touches one of the examples of inadequate parenting strategies that we talked yesterday. So the coach is a football coach, a soccer coach, and he explains that one of his athletes is 11 years old, and he feels enormous pressure every time the father is in his practice.
The coach feels the pressure, or the player?
The player feels the pressure. And the child even cries due to the fear of failure. And the coach asks, how can I help this child, this player, to deal better with this pressure? Yeah,
well, this is kind of related to the first one. The perception of failure needs to be addressed. You need to have a conversation. I say it really dogmatic. You need to. I advise you to talk about what is truly failure. In tennis matches, for example, there's young players. They think they have to win every point. And when I reveal to them that actually you need to win only 51% of the points technically to win a match, and like, wow, you know, that's really strange. And so I don't have to hit everything in. I can play free. I can play like it's an ocean out there. And you'll see that people have what they call, I call it myself, I call it an autocorrect. When you are actually asking them to hit through the ball, or in soccer, just kick the ball. There's a very famous brand that has the Just Do It logo, and I'm a big fan of it because it doesn't involve brain activity. It goes to the instincts of a person, the reflex systems, which I want to coach someone towards. So they're not thinking, they're actually doing, and they're utilizing the years and years of practicing their craft. And then you see the game coming up, and then they're getting in flow, and then they're playing phenomenal because there's space, there's room. And when a player feels constricted and fears and cries and fears the failure, then he feels that he doesn't have room to do what he's actually good at doing. So if you can relay and talk to the player about the different way of looking at success and what is really failure. Failure is not doing anything about it. A mistake, I even tell my kids, I said, you can make mistakes, but we judge each other on how fast do we recover. And we do that with our clients as well. In the process of learning, we tell them, say, remember, we can address the mistake, but what is the recovery? What do we want? And then later I'll explain a little bit more that supports the two selves that Timothy Galloway also talked about, that the doer and the thinker gets to have really separate choices. After the video, right? Okay. All right, next question, if
Yes.
I may.
This question is not totally clear, but what it says is, after a defeat, there are athletes that recover mentally quicker than others. As a coach, how can I find a balance in helping the team as a whole? So some players recover faster from defeat than others.
When I work with teams, I always like having a captain. It's like a mini me, which already, of course, he is very driven to have his team be cohesive together. And so that's a big advantage in team play. You have basically several coaches. And when you're defeated as an opponent, at least if you haven't defeated yourself, then there's many things that you can work on to get better. So again, leading to process goals. When you have team meetings, you talk process goals, not just we lost. Because when we don't win, we learn. And every professional team, they have a special room even. They have academies, they have a special room, debriefing room. When I work with my players, there's always a debrief. When we lose, maybe I give them a little bit time to get over the emotion. But I have to say, people that worked a long time with us, the recovery is sometimes so quick that other players don't realize why we're smiling. We're smiling because we reach certain goals. We're smiling because we know what to work on. Because the most horrible thing for a person to live through is to suffer something and not know what to do, what you can work on. And if you assessed and you debriefed everything as a team, and I like to use captains to voice the team's way of speaking. I like coaching through people. I don't want to be the coach telling everybody what to do. I will give hints and information and schematic works for them to be autonomous. And when they need my help, I will give more information. But I like that the captain can be captain and that he can be seen as the captain in the team. And then you have assistant captain. I love that also, that a captain can appoint an assistant. And in soccer, for example, I find that amazing that you have attackers, midfielders, defenders, and goalies. All different personalities, all different tasks. So they only can speak about their specialty. So an attacker is not talking about the defense so much, but he can give pointers how he feels like when he's attacking. He feels like, hey, close the gaps more often. And because of communication, we're not talking about we lost. No, we're talking about what we can do. And if everybody gives each other constructive criticism and tools, then you're working towards learning and growth. And in any process, I even sometimes make relation to nature. When you plant a seed, you put the seed in there to grow something. So when you fail, you don't stomp on the seed. No, you just water it. You make sure it's take sunlight, and it will grow. But sometimes when you start with mental training or you start in technique, you don't right away get it. But in this current culture, kids sometimes, they feel like they need to be perfect right away. They have not been taught that it's a process. So also help them understand that failure is actually part of the process. They think about babies. If babies didn't learn that they had to get up after falling down, everybody would be laying down. Nobody would be walking. So it's actually a natural process to fail. And fail fast, I usually tell to young players. I fail fast, fail hard, fail many, many times, so we can recover and learn faster. And then you, at a young age, you can already have a mature attitude about how to view failure. Because that is the biggest success. If you can make the right perception about what you failed at, but definitely also what did we do right, what went well, and what do we want to build on. Because I like personally to every day tap out of something positive to get my goals always structured around something that already works. And we can build and stack something on top of that. Something we need to get better at, something we need to develop. So our focus is on what is right and what can we be better. And that's a whole lot more motivating for players and coaches. Because sometimes you're traveling with the player weeks on end all around the world. And wow, you need to stay motivated. Because some of our players, in the beginning, they lose first round. And the next tournament, lose first round. And you're there stuck in a city that you don't know really what to do. But we sign up for another tournament. And there's another tournament. And when your perception goes like, whoa, wait a minute. There's always another tournament. The only time it will not be if I quit. When I quit, then there's no more tournaments. And when you have that perception, oh, we have another chance. We have another match next week. Or we have an exhibition match against a lower team. Sometimes that helps, like second division teams. We sometimes invited second division teams to play against us when I was a basketball player to give confidence, but also for new players to understand how it is to play with this Division 1 team, because it was a complete new level for them because they came from high school. So failure is also a process and how you view it. Yeah.
Very good.
Any questions again, or any comments, or if you have an experience in this, share your statement, and I would love to read it later.
Yes. The next question is from a coach who works with a 12-year-old, and he explains that she's top national. In practice, she's top, but in competitions, she usually chokes and she fails totally.
Yeah, well, this is we find that also in I don't notice as much in the United States, but in the Netherlands I've noticed it, and in Portugal when I'm on the courts and I'm training, I see that the coaching education, I sometimes feel that the separation between practice and competition is made so easily. I see coaches allowing players to just serve like a basket full of balls, not really doing the routine and just the motion. It's basically a warm-up, which is not really competition. So I ask my players, instead of serving a whole basket of balls, I'd rather you serve 20 with the complete routines, with the breathing, with all the things that I work on, building routines for our players, than just hitting 100 balls without any thought or any process. So stop making a separation between either everything is a test, even competition, or everything is competition. Make a choice. It's not either or. We're living in an and. This duality that we live in is sometimes gives the illusion that we have to choose that practice or competition, but it's your sport. So you perform, and at practice, I remember working with a martial artist, every sparring partner ended up on their backs. They all ended up on their back because he was a champion. He's like, if I cannot defeat my own sparring partners, I have no business being in competition. So everything was competition. And we were running out of sparring partners, but it got to a level where it was so known that even the sparring partners started to get results. They were getting better as well because he put everything at a certain level. Netflix has an awesome documentary about Michael Jordan and the Bulls, how he as a champion lifted his team to a certain standard of working, high performance. It's awesome. It's a recommendation. Anybody, even if you're not a basketball player, one of the greats of all time is not just about the basketball, because I enjoy the movement of them, but it's also what it takes to win, and it's failing. It's failing, and I usually say fail forward. You know, we sometimes take a step backwards, but to fail forward. Perception again. What is failure? How you deal with pressure.
Thank you, Dave.
Next question.
Next question is, what mental routines should an athlete have to be successful? What routines should an athlete have to be successful?
Well, again, great question, because these are very important to a player's focus, of course, and also even the coach, because coaches have routines also, sometimes a little bit more hidden, but in routines, there's in general, you have pre-match routines, you have in-match routines, and your post-match routines. Pre-match routines, you have to think of like stretching or doing a certain warm-up with your coach. Some of my players, they like to do hitting pads to just fire themselves up a little bit before matches, or listening to music. That's a routine. But in-match routines, we're talking about a serve, or a basketball player shooting foul shots, or a soccer player shooting a penalty. These are very specific situations which should be always the same. The question was leading towards routines, yes. So how important? It's extremely important, because our comfort and our focus is directly related to how well and how exact is the routine. You can have a kind of an example. I don't like to give the example because it's more rituals than routine, but there's a player called Rafa Nadal. Everybody knows him because he has very unique routines and serves, and he has to touch his ears, and he has to adjust his underwear before serving, which is all rituals. He believes that it's part of it. But if you would try to change that, it will actually probably mess up his timing. So I would never touch that. If I see a player have a kind of a quirky a routine, but part ritual, I would just leave that in place. I don't teach it. I like to not get involved in teaching rituals, but we do get involved in helping players which have an awesome serve, for example, but they're not getting the ball in, for example. And we see that has to do with the preparation, also mental preparation. Some players are thinking too much about other things, either non-tennis related things or tennis related things. So thinking about the grip and thinking about technical things is actually not good. Or foot position, while you need to focus on hitting the ball, it's a distraction. So we teach players to do their routines and to use the tools that get them to do an optimal full routine for example, starting a match, starting a game. There is, of course, a side to that rule. When you're in flow, you can do the routines a little bit faster, of course. But that depends on how the player would like to work. So routine, hugely important.
And routines before the match, during the match.
Yeah, that's why I said post. Also debriefing. There should be a routine of always, even if the coach is not allowed to talk to the player, because some players really don't like to talk to anybody. When they lose, we say, okay, you don't want to talk to me, but at least write down 3 things that you liked about the match and 2 things that you would like to practice for next time. And then we talk later during dinner.
Mm-hmm. One last question that came from the participants focus on how can an athlete that is super focused and perfectionist, but that bothers the colleagues when they miss, This is from a
Yeah, I read this
handball
question.
coach,
Yeah,
and he would like to know how to deal with this situation.
so this is a team sport, and I read this question, and I right away felt the need to say ethics. Teach this player proper ethics, because everybody learns at their own speed. If you go to a forest, there's not one tree the same as the other. So this player needs to learn about ethics, and this perfectionism is actually hurting himself and the team, because a perfectionist is actually, well, if you go to clinical psychology, perfectionism is a clinical illness that is not good unless it's adaptive perfectionism, which is flexible towards letting go of the plan or letting go what we intended, because things change all the time. And this is more of the player's issue than the team's issue. Yes, there might be players that are not as ethical or not as disciplined, or they don't have the same technique as this fantastic player. But I've had many situations when I was coaching a group of youth where the talented player was having prima donna behavior, thinking that he's better than everybody and really on top of the other players. I talked ethics with him, and if he would be resistant to the ethics, I would just ask him to sit on the bench, wait until he wants to be a decent human being and treat his colleagues with love and respect that I believe everybody deserves. Yeah, no matter how good you may be, I mean, I believe I'm very good in my job, but I will never pretend that I can talk to a technical coach about his job and that he should do a better job. That's not my business at all. So there's ethics involved, respect and love for your team. And when the player shows openness to understand that these faults in ethics are hurting himself and the team, and it's making it difficult for you as a coach, then you have to have a talk about ethics.
Thank you, Dave. We have about 15 minutes before our break. So
no more question? There was one more question, I think.
Not from here.
Oh, okay.
If there, Tiago, are there any questions?
No, he will interrupt.
Okay.
He will interrupt if there are any questions. So
for now, and to use these 15 minutes before the break, I would suggest that you reinforce the difference between clinical and performance.
Yeah, yesterday, for those who were not here yesterday, Christina, besides the technical difficulty, I hope it came across what is the difference between clinical and educational psychology or performance psychology. Well, I usually make the analogy with the Formula One team. A Formula One team has all kinds of mechanics and engineers. Well, when the engine is broken after a race, for example, we usually use a mechanic to fix the engine because something is broken. We relate that to clinical psychology. Something is broken. There's a mental illness or a syndrome that is hurting the person and the person around them, which needs to be addressed by a clinical psychologist, the mechanic. And the engineers who are working to have the car move faster, have higher RPMs, they get more out of the engine that was from the factory, they enhance the performance of the car. Those are the engineers. We are more related towards high performance. So we do not work in problems. We deal with challenges, and challenges are not clinical in nature. They're things that need to be addressed, but it's like the upside down parachute. When you start tugging on one talent, usually all the other issues that were challenging start also evolving. So the difference, mechanics, clinicals, and engineers tuning the engine to where high performance is high performance coaching.
Mm-hmm. We have a couple more minutes. We know that there's gymnast coaches in the audience. So I'd like, if possible, that you share.
Well, I like there's so much diversity. We have coaches, athletes from different sports. Rugby coach, I even saw, awesome. I can feel my back already. Yes, the gymnast, because yesterday was a question about how long is the process, because normally role mental coaching, we say when we get a question like how long is this going to take to feel results, and we usually say, well, we need at least 12 sessions to be able to show that we've had result in the mental area. But this particular case was an online session with an athlete from Florida that was had an injury jumping backwards from the bar. And basically, well, it's within my specialty. My specialty is fear and aggression, or assertivity. And we got to talking what fear really is and where did it come from. And she had a Russian coach from a different culture, which was used to coach and train players a little different than the American culture. And the coach was unaware that he was putting a huge amount of pressure on the kind of personality that she had, and she took everything personal, every little failure, and she was so focused on failing or the past or the future. And because she fell and she hurt her ankle, she was injured for a while. When she was back up and running, she was all good. She was doing front flips and all the tumbling and all the amazing bodily movement that these athletes do, but a backflip, she wasn't able to get through it. Every time she tried, she would stop in the mid of the routine, and of course she would get a default. She didn't finish. She didn't get the score that she wanted. So her parents contacted me, and we had an intake. And actually during the intake, we did a session to talk about fear. And when she realized after our talk what fear and danger really is, the difference between fear and danger, I like to say that fear is a false evidence of appearing real. So it's an indication of danger, but usually it's made in the brain first, in the head. It's usually out of a past or a future sense. And since we live in the here and now, and we can only take action in the here and now, the only thing that actually counts if you are in danger. So she was having anxiety attacks while sleeping. While she would wake up sweating, cold sweats. And I said, well, first thing we need to work on is that you realize where you are in the here and now. There is no threat right now. There is no danger right now. So you can learn to do breathing techniques and calm down. But now I would like to address also when you're actually doing the routine, during the routine, I would like you to become aware, how many hundreds of times did you jump backwards and landed on your feet? When you have the hesitation, how many times did you hurt yourself? Well, she only hesitated once, when her coach talked to her. And it became clear. The coach talked in the middle of the routine to her, which activated her thinking. And because the thinking interfered with her body, she didn't fully commit, and therefore she fell. So we made an arrangement with the coach that he promised to not talk during her routine. And it helped. They tried it, and she landed every backwards flip. And I got a phone call and said, well, we're done. We don't need to do the 12 sessions. And thank you very much. We'll keep you posted. And we still, every once in a while, get an update from her, how she's doing. She's coaching now, by the way, because this is quite a while back. But she's using the same techniques that she's learned to teach her young athletes about fear, how to deal with fear, what is real, and what can you do in the here and now. But also be assertive. Tell your coach, please be quiet. I know you mean well, but when you talk, you mean so much to me that I listen to you and I forget to do what I needed to do. And I'll get later more in detail about self 1, self 2, what that actual process is, what is happening in the brain.
Mm-hmm. Since you are talking about coaches, it would be interesting that you share the intervention of the coach right before you entered Roland Garros.
Oh, yeah, this is a lovely situation. This was actually Victor Hanescu, tennis player, where I worked with for 7 or 6 years. We had several team members, but usually at Grand Slams, we would have almost all team members. We would have a technical coach, we would have me, we would have a statistics person that would help us with opponents, to have a little bit information about, for preparation. How is he playing, or how has he been playing in the last couple of tournaments? Grand Slams are always so amazing because you're surrounded by so many top professionals in their field. And well, my goal was to prepare him for a match, and in the draw, we drew a Frenchman, Gaël Monfils, a very popular player in France, and we were going to play on the center court, Philippe Chatrier, with 30,000 French fans. So yes, naturally, our player was a little bit nervous, and for rightfully so, because he was from another country, so they were not going to be supporting him. So I did all my job. I prepared him. We did all the pre-match routines. He did his music. We did his stretching. We did all the things that he likes to do before matches. And I saw readiness. There's something in experience. I need to stop talking now. I just need to let him go, walk down the tube. So where we were waiting for the press to say, okay, the TV is ready, we were waiting to be called on court. The statistics person, which was not an athlete at all, or a famous athlete, or he wasn't a professional athlete, he was just a statistic person. He walks up to Victor and he says, "Why are you nervous?" All innocent, with good intention to say, basically, come on, I understand, it's 30,000 people, you're allowed to be nervous. That's what he meant, I guess. But because he said, "Why are you nervous?" that question activated, and all of a sudden he remembered 30,000 French players, fans, and the player he's going to play, Gaël Monfils, really great player. So we ended up losing the first 4 games. He recovered. He played a fantastic match overall, but it didn't get a fair start. So I like to address this. So when you're part of a team, know your role, know who you are. Like, maybe if I would have said, I would never say this, but maybe if I say, "Why are you nervous?" he could look in my eyes and say, yeah, he's been a professional player himself, But if you've never been a high performance coach or have high performance player, don't step into that doo-doo. That's really going to give you a false image. And actually, he was fired. He was fired. I don't think he even finished the Grand Slam. And he was a lovely person, a really nice person, and he had good intentions. But because he did what he did, the player fired him. And it's many situations when I see colleagues that are entering the team for the first time that don't realize that. Take your time. Don't right away start like, I can do this, I can do that. I mean, you're entering in a team, or you're working with a player that's played tennis already for 10 years, or you're working with another coach that already had contact with him for years. That's valuable information. That is something that you want to cherish, and you want to give the coach a feeling that that is definitely integrated in your intentions to work on the mental aspects. Because we say usually performance enhancement is something to enhance. So we're here to what is already good to make it better. Is that good?
Yeah. Thank you. Since you talked about how the statistician influenced Victor activating Self-1, we could use this.
Do you want me to talk about Self-1?
Yeah. Self-1, Self-2.
All right. This is a very important detail, so pay attention. Stand up or drink some water. I'll drink some water too, because this is a very important part of the process, which is sometimes forgotten by our esteemed colleagues, that they work in the mental, but they only do certain popular things. And very popular here is mindfulness and imagery, visualization. It's very popular. But you cannot start doing any of those techniques when you haven't properly introduced the idea and knowledge of what Self-1, Self-2 is. Self-1 is basically everything the brain does, every knowledge-based, every technical aspect of your craft, which is not actually doing, it's knowing. And knowing doesn't help you play better when you need to do it. So what we do with our players, we first describe the construct of what self-one is. I say this, the librarian. He can talk. There's also the ego, is where the credit goes when we win. But he's incapable of actually governing the nervous system. He's not able to govern the muscle system, because that's actually the cerebellum, where the self-two resides. To make it simple, I'm not talking psychological mumbo jumbo. I'm just saying simple. Cerebellum is the lower part of the brain, which governs everything that's automatic. Reflex system, your eye movement, your heart rhythm, your automatic breathing, but also your performance in high pressure situation when you don't have time to think. Tennis players get a ball shot at them at 200 kilometers per hour. If you're a baseball player, you get a 90 miles per hour baseball throwing at you. You don't have time to think. So we are coaching from this automatic system. We are trying to put our coaching in that memory, the deep memory, where actually the auditory nerves are connected to your deepest memory. That's why how you say something is also more, how you coach self-one and self-two areas. We tell players, we're on court, we actually walk with them. This is an area where you can still think. As the back of the court, where you reach for the towel. But as soon as your foot gets near the baseline, or you're a basketball player, as soon as you step on the court, or you're out of the timeout, you go self-two. You're on court. No more time for thinking. We are going to do what the coach said, or we're going to do what we internally decided. As a tennis player puts his foot on the line to serve, at that moment it should be kick serve, slice serve, or body serve, but one, not 2 or 3 different serves. And if he doesn't, and that's why sometimes in the beginning when players are filmed, the commentators say, what's he doing? You know, did he have a bad toss? No, he didn't even toss the ball. No, I know what he's doing. He's not serving because he doesn't have clear yet what he wants to do. And players are actually, I tell them, you're not allowed to hit the serve if it's not clear yet which serve you want to hit. I don't care if you get a time warning. I don't care if you get a point deduction, because after a warning, you get a point deduction in tennis. I want to learn to teach you to only hit serves. Like a technical coach would say, if it's a bad toss, you do not hit the ball. You just pick it up and you toss it again. And the same on the mental level. You do not hit a serve when it's not clear what you want to do. And that, of course, produces better results. When you do that process well, you get better serves, your serve percentage. I've worked with players that had awesome serves, but they were first serve was 45%, which is not quite enough. So we were able to reach higher, just 10% higher, which is a huge, significant difference. To have your first serve to raise 10% just by doing the routine and the process correctly.
Mm-hmm.
In self-two.
And definitely not serve if you have a negative thought that you're going to miss.
Well, that is something like, okay, a little test for you at home. Listen to this. What do you think about when I tell you to not think about a yellow tennis ball? You can write it in the comments. I already know the brain is not capable of thinking what it's not. So your brain automatically, so if you say don't double fault, now let me go to the example of when I was a player. I was playing a match and it was 69-69. We were about to defeat the champion. And I was fouled. The referee called for me to shoot 2 foul shots. Well, my lovely coach asked for a timeout, which is terrible for a player because he has to wait all this time and thinking about, oh, I can win the match for the team. And during the timeout, everybody was hitting me on the shoulders. Come on, you know, we win if you don't miss. Well, I was actually a very high percentage foul shooter. I was shooting between 80 to 90% foul shots, but I missed them both. How's that possible? Well, normally my routine would be, I had a 90% chance of at least making 1. I only had to make 1 to win, but we lost because the next attack, they scored and we lost. And oh my God, I felt so bad. And Nowadays, I tell coaches of basketball players, like, know your players. Don't call a timeout when you know this player would just rather just go ahead and shoot the 2 foul shots and make them and then have the timeout. It's these little things that make huge differences for results. That seems so trivial. So yeah, well, I needed to call a timeout. Yeah, but these little differences could have put your team ahead when you are doing these little process things correctly. And when you are in top professional and the highest level of sports, these little things can have huge differences. Because look at the top players. And any tennis coach out there would agree with me probably that the top 300 are all amazing tennis players. They can hit the ball clean and crisp and really nice. But what's the difference? It's the little things that they do, the pressure, how to deal with pressure, and also failing, how to deal with failure. You see Federer missing a ball really badly, but still the game ends up in his favor. He has the advantage. What does he do? Well, he does the mental process. And that I would like to go to a break. Thiago is with me. Can we take a break right now, Thiago?
Yes. Thiago said to us.
Yes, Dave. Thanks a lot
5
for
minutes now.
everything. We will do 5 minutes of small break. See you.
Okay.
5 minutes.
And I can look at this question. I see another question.
Yeah. Yes, I think
All right,
we do I think that you can answer the question after
Sure.
these 5 minutes.
So Ricardo,
Okay.
thank you for your question. We'll get back to your question after the break.
Hello again, Dave.
Hey, there we
Thanks
go.
a lot for everything. I think that now it's a good opportunity for you answer with the question that Ricardo put
Okay.
here in the chat.
Let me
Thanks.
read.
Thanks for everything.
Yes, thank you. Let me first read Ricardo's question. Okay, Dave, how I focus my athletes on a penalty shootout in a stadium full of fans. How can I train my athletes to do this decisive moment in football? Well, fantastic question, Ricardo, because we actually had an experience with this. I cannot reveal which club we worked with and the player, but it was a very famous player that was a fantastic game player. When it's in game, he played phenomenal. He could just be self too, like I explained. But penalty shooting is kind of inviting the self one to get activated, and it's courage, and it's a lot of players that don't want to step in front to take charge. So, but sometimes it's also the process. How do you train penalties? I'll get back to your question, but I would like to first share to everybody this little anecdote story, because we got asked to come in for a specialistic practice. It was just penalties, and the whole team was practicing, but this one player was practicing by himself away from the team because it was a very sensitive situation, because he was such a good player that nobody wanted to rub him the wrong way, because he couldn't shoot penalties. He would shoot everything to the goalie. And I decided to walk over there, and I introduced myself, and I said, "Oh, so what are you guys doing?" And they had set up, somebody came up with the idea to give him targets to shoot in the goal. There was a blue and a yellow and a red and a green big dot that he could hit. And I was seeing him being very successful. He shot all the targets in the goal. And I was like, okay, I don't see any problem here. I mean, I don't know what we're doing here, because it seems like he's getting everything. So I say, let's take the targets away. Let's put a goalie inside. Let's see, because I'm a person that wants to see in real competition. And I asked the player, so how many out of 10 can you shoot in the goal? Adding a little pressure, you know. He didn't really know who I was, but he said, okay. And boom, what do you know? All the balls went straight to the goalie. And it's like, okay, this is strange. And I talked with the coaches. I was like, well, you're doing phenomenal work here. And so I don't understand. Like a minute ago, he was shooting all the targets in all the corners, and exactly with any kind of spin on it. And he had all kind of variations. And he's shooting everything to the goalie. Well, subconsciously, we found out that what is the only target? If you think about it, real simplistically, what's the only target in the goal? The goalie. So we said, okay, we need to teach him differently. Other players, they had a subconscious collective mind of saying, okay, we shoot the target, so it's in the direction of where the coaches are trying for me to shoot. But subconsciously, not really intending, of course, they were training this player to shoot at targets. And because the goalie was for him the only target, it was too silly sometimes to think about it. But he said, yeah, I really feel that I need to shoot a target. And then we decided, I said, you know what? Have you ever, as a kid, hit the ball through a window? He's like, yeah. I remember I was playing at my neighbor and I broke the window. I said, okay, what we're going to do from now on, we're going to get rid of the targets. Can you visualize the corners and the top corners as windows? And forget about the goalie. I want you to just see the visuals. At first, we put some tape, so where the angles were, but then later we removed the tape because we didn't want him to have targets anymore, because the idea of target practice was actually really bad for him. So he changed the way of practicing, and he made the perception of shooting through windows. And it was actually fun. He said, oh, you know what? I can even hear the glass breaking. And he had fun with the idea that he was breaking windows. And well, after practice, he seemed to be continued doing fine. We never got another call that we had to come again. And it was such a simple little thing that nobody really realized, that every person is different and we all interpret things differently. And it was not even an intentional interpretation, it was a subconscious interpretation. So, but because we trained it so well, he wasn't even affected by the fans because he was so focused on shooting through windows. That's all he could think about. He was able to think so simplistic, to just be like a kid, self-to, shoot through the windows. And it didn't matter if there were 30, 40,000 fans yelling. He's in his own little cocoon. So to answer Ricardo's question, train the players that are usually allowed to shoot penalties. I know there's a selection process and some players always like to shoot penalties. But for the ones that don't really like to, but they are asked to also, because if it's a very important match and the deciding factor is penalty shooting, then they need to practice that, but find out how do they interpret the practice and how do you shut up everything outside from doing the task. Now, I explained already, self-1 is actually capable of hearing the fans. Self-2 doesn't even hear. The self-2 is so in the doing, he can only see the ball. He can only see what he's doing. And when you're able to quiet down the mind and you're able to train your players with tools, there's readily available because the coaches were not doing anything wrong. To shoot targets is actually pretty good. But remove the targets after a while. Let them visualize it. And because the act of visualizing the targets is a self-2 thing, because if you give a visual image, that self-2 reacts even more, because self-2 is a symbolical language. Self-2 doesn't speak the language of words. So talking too much activates self-1. Words activate self-1. But if you talk less and work in certain symbolism, when I work with players, I like to work with schema words. One little word that means everything, you know. I can say anything. If I can say pão com chouriço, you know. In Portugal, that's bread with sausage. People love it, you know. And people, when you eat that, you might have memories with it. So many things are attached to it. Or fado music, since there's a lot of Portuguese, you have a feeling with it. And this feeling is much more important to self-2 than the actual logic of what we're about to do. So I hope that gives you a little bit of indication where you need to search to get your players to actually be successful at shooting penalties, because it's a very specific thing. I also would like to advise, let them decide, write down what, from the moment they selected to do a penalty, what are they going to do? They're going to grab the ball, put it on the dot, and how many steps backwards and how many to the side. That is always going to be the same. And from the moment that they have decided this is how I'm going to shoot it, they never ever change it anymore. And the direction is made up in their mind before. I don't care what the goalie is going to do, I'm going to shoot it, because even if the goalie decides to go in the right corner, a well-taken penalty with decisiveness and assertiveness will still go in. The goalie has to be a top-tier goalie to get one that is shot with full confidence and full power, because those balls, they come at you so fast. Goalie is outnumbered. So the advantage should be with the penalty taker. And that advantage you can get when you work out the routine, clarify, this is how we're going to do it. Correct? We agree? Okay, contract, we're not going to change it anymore. This is how we're going to do it. And that's the corner that we're going to take. And because it's decided, self-2 gets the image, because you visualize, it knows what he wants to do, and it's loyal, and it's going to do exactly that. Just like it will do exactly what you don't want if you put negative images. If you, for a tennis player, you say, don't double fault. If you say that, yeah, then Self2 is going to say, oh, double fault. It's that loyal. It doesn't judge at all. It just follows orders. But it's the greatest tennis player that ever lived, the greatest soccer player that ever lived. The Self2 is the game. Self2 is the zone. Self2 is the best player. But it needs to get good instructions.
So in terms of the penalty, the question also asks, how do you help the athletes focus when there is a shootout, penalty shootout in a stadium full of fans?
Well, I like very much, you can see many matches in Champions League or even World League, and the best teams that shoot penalties, they're together. That's the power of team. The power of team is that you support each other and you give each other their best chance. You don't talk too much, just stay together. You work in symbolism, and the symbolism of togetherness and camaraderie, and especially if I think about football represents camaraderie, and you're united and we're doing this together, and this one goal is hugely important. But you go ahead and do your routine. I'm not going to tell you how to shoot your penalty, like you're not going to tell me how to shoot my penalty. Let the player decide. Unless he asks for advice, then you can say. But if he doesn't ask, let him be. Don't talk to him. A person that's about to shoot a foul shot or is about to shoot a penalty. I mean, tennis coaches, you do not start talking to a player that is in the middle of his serve routine, correct? So do not talk to somebody who's about to do something very important and his focus is in the right place. Unless he asks you, be quiet. Don't say anything.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dave. Now that we addressed that question, we could transition to the video.
Yes, I want to say a little bit why I selected this video, because this video is from 18 years ago. It's from a match between Agassi and Federer. At this time, Agassi was still the top dog, is the player to beat, and Federer was starting to show that he was going to be the greatest of all time. But at that time, you see some points where you can see the Federer that we all know, but some points you can also see that the mental game is not working for him yet, and that I want to prove to you that you can see it in the body language. Specialists like Christina and I, we can see certain things is really trained, and because this match is still so pure in his trained version, I think it's even for the amateur, it's going to be obvious that he's doing something that's been trained to him. And because it's not really automatic yet, it actually sometimes can not help him in the beginning. And we always say, please bear with the process, because it's going to get worse before it gets better, because we're asking you to do something different. We're asking you to do something extra, which you haven't done before. But keep doing it. Let's make it part of the process. It's like learning how to drive a stick shift car. If you're an American, you never drove a stick shift car. Well, in Europe, we drive stick shifts. So learn, take your time. It's going to be a process. You know, you're going to grind some gears. Keep doing it, because we want to drive this car anyway, right? So who's going to start, you or?
Could you ask the participants to look also between the points, not just to the points?
Yes, I'll narrate as Thiago plays. I'll also talk about what we're seeing. Mm-hmm. Thiago, you can go ahead and start the video. Is everybody seeing the video? I'm not having any sound. Yeah, it needs to. Okay. There's a lot of cuts. Is it me or? No, it's fluent. All right.
No, it's not.
All right. There's something with. Yeah, it's hard to see like this.
Dave, everything is okay.
Yes, it's because
yes.
I'm seeing shocking images, like not fluent. All right. What I would like you to focus on is the body language of the players. You see Agassi, he knows he's the top dog, he's the best player. Federer knows he's a great player, but you see inconsistency consistency in Agassi's body language. It's kind of the same all the way around. He walks the same way. He has that funny little walk, and it's always the same. Federer is also doing something that I teach my players. And when the player is done playing a point, win or lose, you turn your back. This has several advantages because your human response, it's very human to have a human response, to say, to scream, or when you're winning a point, yes, but it's never good to point a fist to your opponent. So if you turn your back already towards your baseline, it's already good that you have done the work of the mental trainer that asks you to turn the back. And also some part is either relax the hand by grabbing the tennis racket. It also allows your grip to dry, but it would even be better if you do it in the offhand to completely relax the dominant hand. Why is that important? Because for tennis, you need sensibility. It's a very micro sport. So to relax the hand. Also what you see, you see the serve, that's a routine. That's very beautiful. I love seeing Roger's loose routine. It's always the same. You can see he does a couple of bounces, let it bounces off his chest, and then he goes for the serve. But he looks in the court before serving. He always does it, and always the same. You'll never catch him doing it differently. And that's trained. You even see that in the return routine. And Agassi was known for having a very strong return. And his return routine is always right, ready, when the server is ready. So he's always at optimal focus, optimal activation. And you even see him sometimes jiggle his legs. When he feels that he doesn't have his legs under him completely, he does something to make himself be a little bit more activated. Maybe we get to see it still. Oh, he's now serving. And I like to show this because this was the time before Federer became the dominant force in tennis for decades. For as long as he's still top. All right. Yeah, this shot, also this lob, was pure self too. Okay, you can stop the video, Thiago. I want to talk a little bit about also this last shot. To hit a difficult lob like that out of that position, what do you think would have happened if he thought about the shot? Like, should I play cross? Should I play down the line? Or should I play lob? He would have probably framed it. He would have probably hit it with the tennis racket's frame. And because he's so self-too and he's playing free, you make a lob like that. It's an amazing shot. And I mean, you can go to any highlight reel of the best shots made in tennis history. Victor Ionescu even has one as a fake smash and then a tap at the US Open, which he was so relaxed. It just felt like doing it. And it's in the top 10 most desired trick shots ever. And when you get to play like that, then you get your game, how you want to play, even in soccer or judo or gymnastics or rugby, then your true potential starts to come because there's no more mental blockage from getting to your automatic nervous system. Because I'm sure in other sports, you also have decisive moments, split-second decisions, which make huge differences for the end result in a match. The turning point, you have many movies that's about that 1 inch. It's about, in tennis, if you shoot 1 inch to the left or a centimeter, it's either in or out. But the shot was fully committed, it was good, but we judge it as failure. And we don't need to do that. You can work and hit the shots, shoot the way you want to shoot. Also, penalties for Ricardo. You got to shoot the way you intended to shoot. It might be stopped, it might be missed, but because you're fully committed, the chances that it will happen exactly the way you intended when you go with it, it's much higher. Then you start to rationalize it, or if you're trying to do something with fear. Fear inhibits your ability to do something natural. And we as a human being, maybe I can explain a little bit actually how the function of the brain, because we are overestimating the capabilities of the brain. Let's remember that this thing inside our head has been designed hundreds of thousands of years ago, if we can believe the natural theory of evolution. But even everybody would agree that the brain was designed before we even had language. So we also had no technology. All the things, even psychosocial issues. What will people think of me? Am I good enough? All these things, the brain has just been designed for one structure only, to create safety, survival. So if we put fear in our minds, the brain computes this as real. And because we don't filter it, we don't tell the brain, oh, stop now, this is not real, the brain actually starts producing chemicals into the body that are of a fight and flight system, which is basic psychology. I trust that most people have heard about this. The fight and flight system is when somebody is in danger, you either fight, or you run away, or you faint. That's 1% of people that will faint, but it's automatic. But that usually gives me ground to tell players it's actually illogical to be fearful, because when it's true danger, it's an automatic system. You don't even think about it. And to actually give a side note, humans are the only species, besides dogs and cats that have been domesticated, but the only species that walk around in calm state and have adrenaline in their body, which is actually an illogical fact, but it's a fact. The only reason is that we are not handling our realities very well. Past, present, and future are not separated correctly. And when we do not know how to use the brain the way it's been designed, then everything gets all scrambled up. And if we don't define what self-1 and self-2 is, and what's inside and outside our control, this axis is very important, then it's just a gibberish. It's just a wheel of fortune. If you say, whatever we're going to land on, that's how we're going to play today. And that's not how high performance works. High performance works from the very basis of knowing self-1, self-2. Am I playing self-1? Awareness. Oh, I'm playing self-1. I need to do some work. Or if you are aware that you're playing well, stop asking questions. Just play. Continue. Don't talk to me. I've even had players where I wanted to coach. They tell me, not now. Not now, Dave. Okay, and then I be quiet because they are feeling it. Maybe you ex-athletes or your athletes out there, you know the feeling. When you are feeling it, you don't want anybody to talk to you. Practices, sometimes I ask coaches, please, it's going well. Just instead of like doing what you intended to practice next, let him play a little bit longer. Enjoy playing in the flow. Because if this can become a habit, he can recognize the flow easier and how to get there faster. This leads me to talk about the spiral.
Before the spiral, could you give the example of the factory that had a real...
Oh, yeah, this is a good idea. Actually, because of one of the questions I got to this idea, we were asked to work with a sales team from an expensive brand of factory machinery. And they were going to give us a grand tour of the work area. And there was an accident. One of the trolley trucks hit a 300-pound gas bottle, and the tip was knocked off. Well, what happens is when that happens, it starts flying through the air and it goes everywhere. But it's amazing how you can see how safety protocols and training right away kick in, because everybody, the person that was in charge of me for my safety, right away grabbed my head and turned my head towards the accident. He said, look at the bottle. Very simple words. And it was flying. It's 300 pounds. It could kill you if you... But everybody was calm. Nobody panicked. And because everybody looked at the threat, it was resolved. It ended up flying out the roof into the yard, but nobody had an injury, because actually you could injure yourself by not looking where the danger is at. So players have also mentioned to me, when we work on awareness and focus, that they feel like they have more time. You know where the ball is coming from. Like when we work with goalies, keep your eye on the ball. Don't look so much. Yeah, you can look at his body language and specialist in coaching, but you have to see the ball. If you look too much to all the body language, you're going to be distracted. So where is the origin? Players that have mentioned to me that they don't see the ball no more. They just lose the ball because they're so in their head. When we train them again to look from the opponent's blade, when it gets hit, you do something. You do an activity. You make yourself make the rhythm, because self too loves rhythm. It's you play music. I mean, I play music sometimes just to play around with Christina, and when she's not aware, and she starts dancing without without any intention, but the body just starts moving. And so does rhythm. Tennis has a certain rhythm. Everything has rhythm. And when you find that rhythm, when you are in that rhythm, and you know where the ball is coming from, just like the factory workers, they knew where the threat was coming, everybody was calm. And the training was followed. And when you trust your training, you get to become very comfortable. You get to do performances that you never even imagined that you could do, that you could return Ivo Karlovic serve 240 kilometers per hour. Wow, I returned this one. I remember Victor Ionescu for the first time hitting a down-the-line winner on Wimbledon against Andy Roddick. We just started working for maybe 2-3 weeks, but he looked up in the coach's box. He looked at me like, I get it now. I gotta commit. I just block the shot and commit. And one of the most amazing down the line winners in his Wimbledon history.
Mm-hmm. So
I have another question here. I am a trampoline gymnast. In our competitions, we have to do 2 routines. So after fail the first routine, how can we empty our heads so that we don't feel the pressure of failing in? Wow, Marco, fantastic. Actually, I have something very special for you, which I ask almost every client to watch. And for all the other spectators, I'm going to share with you a movie that can incorporate almost everything that you just asked, but I will elaborate on your question as well. The movie is called Peaceful Warrior. Actually, got to have contact with the original person, where the man is named Dan Millman. Peaceful Warrior. It was with Nick Nolte, and I don't remember the other the actor. But it's an awesome movie about, actually, Dan Millman was a trampoline gymnast, but in the movie they make him to be a ring gymnast on the rings. I don't know why, but the same process applies here for answering your questions. Definitely, after this, go download this movie, watch this movie. I believe you'll really, really enjoy the movie itself, but all the hidden messages in there, that what you should focus on. Well, first of all, if you're a trampoline gymnast, I'm going to assume that you enjoy jumping, that you enjoy jumping on a trampoline. It's fun. If you look at kids, jumping on a trampoline, there's nothing more fun than jumping on a trampoline. So when you fail, and to empty your mind, try to reconnect with what is your joy of doing what you're doing, and let go of the past mistake. Try to focus on what things went well, and what would you like to be aware of for your next routine. So your focus is going to functional things that are actually inside your control. Going away from the past, because if you stay in the past, remember, self too is loyal to copy exactly what you keep in your mind. So if you do the work and you clear your mind and you go to the joy, why you became a trampoline artist in the first place, that already sets a calm tone. That also dissipates all the adrenaline and all the negative toxins in your body from the fear and from the failure. And then you get access to what is the routine. Then, if you need, even write down the routine. Sometimes writing things makes it a memory. Oh, Marcus, he already saw the movie. It's awesome. Fantastic. So you know what I speak about. And the end of the movie, spoiler alert, he talks with a fellow gymnast about getting the gold, because it's all about the gold. When I get the gold, my father will love me and everybody will love me. I'll get the sponsors and then my life will be complete. But Dan actually ends up saying, you know what, why I do so well is because I don't care about the gold. I care about the movement. I care about the feeling that my body has, like in the real Dan Millman. I like the feeling of my body lifting up from the floor. And I'm in the present moment. I'm noticing my body going up. And because I'm aware what my body is doing, I know when to put pressure on my belly to pull that, tuck that turn in, and to do that salto correctly, and do that flick flock, or if I'm saying the words wrong, please excuse me. It's been a while since I worked with a gymnast, but the joy, the experience of the here and now sometimes is much more important than getting the gold. I would say all of the times, because the result is gold, but the process to get the gold is way more important, because not just like mathematics, if you do the formula correctly, you get the sum, you get the result. So when you do the routine and you see it a little bit more logic based, like, okay, you know what, I'm going to address my routine the way I practiced it hundreds of times or dozens of times, and I'm going to give it my best shot. Even though I failed the first one, I get another chance. This relates me actually to players that make a difference between first and second serve. I usually say, no, you just have two chances to make it very difficult for the opponent. And you can do a hard serve or a soft serve, just a specialistic serve to start the game. And that's a completely different perception. And actually, it's helped my players a lot that their first serve percentage was getting better because they knew they had a great second serve. I can still make it difficult the second, so I can take a little bit more risk on the first. I'm just going to go full. I'm going to go after it. And that's why I would like to recommend you, when you do your first routine, do it with full confidence. Go ahead and really allow yourself, your body, to feel the experience. And when you connect with that, even before you do routine, do your pre-routine. Do it in your head with a nice music that you feel like, oh, this is how I feel. I feel like flying. And when you do these kind of things, you're preparing yourself to execute the command of doing a routine. It's like almost like my son is doing coding, and he always talks about, oh, Papa, what you're saying, it's coding basically. You're coding your brain to run a protocol. No thought is actually, when you go into self-2 protocol and in the routine, there's no even thought. There's a gymnast, Dutch gymnast, gold medalist. She afterwards got the gold, and she actually said, while I was doing, I wasn't even aware what I was doing. It felt automatic to me. And that's the best thing that a coach could ever hear. I see sometimes players in the ATP. Federer also had a match in Halle. He already won the match, but he was walking to the ball boys to ask for more balls. Against Nishikori, he won already. But he was so self-2, so in the process, that he didn't even think about the score. Because what's the score? Important. Yeah, okay, in ITF, you don't have referees sometimes. You have to know what the score is. But it's not so important, because if you just do the process better than the opponent, the chances are you're winning. And also for the gymnast, Marco, when you do your routine the best you can, you're going to get the highest score that you possibly can get for your routine. Is that competitive enough? Maybe not today, maybe tomorrow, but because you're doing your routine the way you trained it, you have your best chance to do your performance the best way you could possibly do it, by being self too.
Thank you, Dave.
Yes.
Perhaps you could talk a little bit about the situation in which sometimes coaches in similar situations, they say, relax and forget about the mistake. And
yeah, a common thing is for you coaches out there, and I don't want to offend you, but some of you are well-intended people with a lot of knowledge and very good expertise, but sometimes we're not always aware, what does the player really know? And if you do not have an assertive player that actually will ask you a question like, what do you mean? Because I've had a situation where the coach was yelling at a football player, like, relax, relax, relax. And like the player was not understanding, and he looked like really like kind of lost. And the coach was getting pissed. He's like, oh, he's the dumbest player I've ever met. And I'm like, I was getting a little bit like annoyed by the coach, because it was definitely, in my eyes, not the player's fault, because I could see in the body language of the player, he didn't understand the instructions. Relax, relax. So the coach walks back to me and tells me he's the dumbest player I've ever met. And I say, I'm sorry, I actually find you the dumbest coach that I've ever met. And he looked at me like, whoa. I said, yeah, because you're not seeing that he's not understanding your instructions. He's confused. He doesn't understand. So let's call him to us, and I'm going to ask him one question. And the player comes. The guy was like a mountain. He's huge. And I asked him, do you know how to relax? He said, no, coach, I don't know. What should I do? I said, well, have you heard about some breathing techniques? Or think about something like that makes you feel more comfortable doing what your coach is asking to do. I said, oh, yeah, that would be cool. But how? How do I breathe? Because he was starting to breathe like really high, like upper in the chest, which only actually produces more adrenaline if you breathe really high and short. So I asked him, okay, breathe deep to your belly. He wasn't able to do it. He did not know how to diaphragm breathing, which we call centering. Centering breathing. It comes also, if you have seen any martial arts movie, they do centering before they do kicks, before they do punches, and that's where your power is, your center mass. Well, you can get that lowered by breathing lower. And then for tennis players, it's important. For soccer players, for rugby players, to have a good center of gravity in your body. It helps you in every performance for biomechanics. I mean, maybe next time I invite a biomechanic to talk about these important specialists. Help me again, the question.
there is no question.
Okay. This happens sometimes when I get so excited to talk about it. Okay, so the coach, he apologized, and he said, you know what, you're absolutely right. I should have realized that he doesn't understand my instruction. Then once the player knew that he received a good idea, but then understood what to do, he did relax, and he was able to run the play. He remembered how the play was supposed to run. It was a football. It's all kind of patterns they have to run. Other instances, it was a tennis coach that the coach kept yelling at the player during the play. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, don't talk during play. But he was yelling, don't lean back. Don't lean back. I know some players, they are playing so fearful that they're actually starting to swoop the ball and leaning back. And I know that's not what you want, tennis coaches, but what do you want? I actually say, can you stop yelling for a moment? I'd like to tell you something. And I said, tell her at least what you want, but tell her in between points. When she comes to the towel, say, like, commit to the shot, or quick feet. Get your feet ready. Say something that's actually part of the constructive thing that you want her to do. And it changed. And the coach said, wow, I was never really taught how to do affirmative speech. Coaching is an art. When you're really technically aware, you know what to do, but you don't know how to transmit what you want, then you're actually getting the opposite of your desires. You wanted to get the player to hit through the ball. well, then say hit through the ball. If you say the opposite, then it's a negative speech. We call that negative speech. We coach always towards affirmative speech. Say what you do want, not what you don't want.
And the same in the situation when you miss the shot because you're...
Yeah, the same. When I miss the foul shots, everybody's saying don't miss. We will win if you don't miss. I mean, come on. I feel sorry for myself when I hear this now. At the time, I just felt really terrible, but it's not the best thing for the brain. Like we did a little test. Don't think about a yellow tennis ball or a white soccer ball. The brain is just an organ. It's a fantastic organ. We have high capacities for thoughts, and we can do wonderful things with our brains. But in competition, in quick situation, it's too slow. I compare it to the CPU of a computer. Yeah, you can have 50 or 300 gigabytes of CPU memory. That doesn't mean that the computer is fast. You need working memory, and that's your reflex system. That's your cerebellum. When you have developed and practiced, you trained your cerebellum to the top level it's capable, then you have a fast computer. And then all the tennis or all the soccer and all the sport that you've been doing for years gets to be automatic. Because I usually tell our players about levels of consciousness, and the first level of consciousness is not having consciousness. Basically, you're unaware that you're unaware. Then the second level is you're aware that you're unaware. That's usually a great process to be in to learn, to start learning new things, and to be humble, to accept instructions from coaches or your parents or fellow players. And then we want to get to level 3, that you're aware that you know something. You're aware that you have tools. That gives great comfort. Because I remember that we had a little bicycle accident with my daughter, and she scraped her leg really bad, almost to the bone. And whoa, there was a little bit of panic because I saw my daughter with blood. And no parent wants to see that. So another bicyclist stopped, and he gave me liquid bandage, and we sprayed it on there, and whoa, we had a tool. Immediately all the panic was gone. My daughter was calm. We could go easily to the hospital, and there was a tool available. So that's also when you empower your players, or you are a player and you're using the tools. That's why we're so proud that our books have off-court and on-court tools. Then you feel empowered because you can reach for something. When something is not going your way, hey, you've practiced bounce hit. Let me try this in match play now. I can do this now. Or thought stop and replacement. That's an exercise also that we hammer on for our clients to be in control. What is in your mind? What is the dominant thought in your mind? Replace it if it's a negative. If it's not producing anything for your performance, then get rid of it. And how do you do that? Well, it's also in the process of working with a coach or with us or reading our book. When you have tools available, it produces calmness and empowerment in the here and now. And that's the only moment where you can actually do something. You cannot go in the past and change something. You cannot go in the future and do something. So you might as well focus on here and now.
Mm-hmm. And since you are talking about self-dialogue and dialogue, it would be interesting to hear you talk about the difference when players say, I have to, or I want to.
Oh, yeah. This is cognitive, the actual process in the brain. Certain words get actually registered differently. And I'm going to choose just words like if and when. Basically, if you do some social filtering, they are almost the same thing. But now in a setting, I take you to a setting that we're in a hospital. A family member is in the operating table and several hours pass, and then the nurse comes into the waiting room and the nurse says, if your family member is done with surgery, or if they make it through surgery, you can visit them. Or the nurse comes after a couple of hours and she says, when your family member is done with the surgery, you can go visit them. These two tiny little words, because I actually have this as an example, because we work with a medical team as well, and we had to teach the nurses to watch out what you're saying. Because if you want to spend a little bit of time just telling an update to the people who are in the waiting room, then you use the word when. If you want to spend hours explaining what you actually meant, you say if, because people will respond extremely emotional. If you use if, what? You mean there's a chance that he won't survive? You get 1,000 questions. And the nurse actually has to go back to the surgery room to help out. So, power of words, how you use it. Also, would, could, should. They almost seem like they're the same thing. Or I have to, I must, or I can. It's in my ability to do it, or I have to. It's the difference. How do you interpret something? Also, as coaches, how you say something is also how the next reaction is going to be from your player. So learn about affirmative speech, learn about what certain words mean, and is there a better word to use? Like, for example, if or when. When I work with goal setting, it's always when. And we have also a rule, for example, we do not speak about problems. We're such privileged people in our work, and people are usually very wealthy and famous. I cannot imagine that we have problems, so I automatically make a contract with them that we don't use the word problems. Because a problem is a problem when it persists and is chronic and you don't have really much control of it. And we like to use the word challenge. And for an athlete, for me, you name the word challenge, I'm right away. I'm all ears. I want to hear what you got to say. The next words out of your mouth is like I can almost pull them out of your mouth, because challenge means something. To athletes, it means something. To coaches, hey, this is a challenge. Let's see if we can face it or we can get through this, you know. But a problem, it completely sets you in a different mindset. It's right negative. It's right away of failure. It's right away focused on where we are not reaching our goals.
Dave, you talked about awareness, and Raw Mental Coaching really values awareness, but also the use of schemas, body language, and keeping things simple.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the schemas?
Well, since we are living in the West and we love to complicate things, even the school system sometimes it's hung together. I'm surprised how certain systems are still in place after 50, 60 years of same way. There's so much knowledge of how the brain actually works that we're sometimes surprised that we are still using similar techniques that were derived from 50, 60 years ago of psychology, which it's so much more modern nowadays. Could you repeat your question one more time?
If you can explain the use of schemas.
Yeah, well, schemas, again, is a symbolism. And what did we say? Self-2 loves symbolism. It doesn't like words, it doesn't understand words, it needs action. So it's basically go there. Okay, short. Or if we have history together and we have a word together, thought stop replacement, you know, I could say that to the player, or I can make a symbol. You know, I usually make a symbol. I say replace, like, and they understand. I don't have to speak. They look, one look, and oh yeah, replace this thought. And before the next point, they cannot start the next point, or if they are receiving, they have to get their return routine finished, and they have to have self-2 activated again. They cannot dwell on the past, so replace it. So that's a symbolism. And we have schemas. Sometimes off-court work, I try to build on previous experiences, which were, I just say to a player, okay, London 2011, and whoa, the player right away knows what I mean, because we were there together, we know what happened, and if he's listening right now, he knows exactly that we played the smiling game. We were playing a game, walking down the street, working on assertivity, trying to make as many people smile and see who could get the most smiles at the other person. Just off-court work. It's a childish little game, but it actually helped the player become more interactive with people and psychosocial development. Or like tell you something about this. And when you meet professional players, that have been in the field for 10 years, for example, already top players, they sometimes seem like little children. Why? Because it happened to me as well when I was a player. I was only in gyms, I was only playing basketball, or I was only studying. So I did not have time to play like regular children, learn like regular children. And so actually I found it very interesting when I first time I met some of these top players, lovely people, and interviews. They are very well trained in the interviews. But when they can just be themselves in the locker room or in the players' lounge, I love to see. I'm not going to say any names, but I love to see the playfulness, almost the childlikeness of these players, because they're basically an 18-year-old for 10 years. And then what we did also with some of our professional athletes were in their autumn of their career, we are already trying to help them with the psychosocial development and to teach them about the difference in the transition, because a lot of athletes, when they stop playing, it is a very scary period. It happened to me also. I did not have the coaching that we give to our clients, and it was a dark time. I did not have the identity anymore as a basketball player. And so our clients also get introduced to not be a tennis player no more. Well, you're still a famous person, but you're not a tennis player no more. But this also related to amateur level. If you get an injury and you're no longer able to play the sport that you really love doing, it's in a more micro situation, but it's still a sense of identity. So also in The Peaceful Warrior, that movie that I already mentioned, the main character gets injured in his sport and he has to reinvent himself. And he goes through a very difficult period where he has to accept that he might never ever do his sport again. And that you can really, I really recommend that you also work with a psychologist or a performance enhancement psychologist if there's no clinical issues and just performance issues to help you through it. If you don't have that available, you don't have budget to hire that, then search for a support system. Even coaches, coaches in huge amounts of pressure. Sometimes they need to guide 5 or 6 players, and they're traveling with them. Wow, that's a lot of responsibility. But ask support. Ask for an assistant coach if it's available. Sometimes just asking, and they say, "Oh, sure, actually, I would love to go with you." And then you share the burden. Also, parents, when you are dealing with parents that assume that you're going to just do everything, even the parenting almost, then be assertive. Say what you need. And also, players, I always recommend be assertive. If you don't understand what your coach is saying to you, and it's not completely going through your filter, say, what is it that you mean? Or say, what you just said to me, I understand this, is that correct? And then start training.
Mm-hmm. We are at the point that we could take a 5-minute break, but before we go to the break, I would like to challenge the participants to think about the information, the strategies, the stories that they heard yesterday and today. And
yeah, it's a lot of information.
Yes.
Oh yeah, remember,
and when they return,
hydrate yourself.
When they return from the break, we would appreciate if they can share some insight. One thing that, at least that yesterday and today was meaningful for them, or made sense, or anything.
Well, of course, do what Christina asked. Write down in the comments some event or question or something that you would like to share about all the information, or just mention what did you find interesting in this, and maybe you'd like to hear a little bit more about. Otherwise, I will continue with what I was going to talk about. I just slipped my mind. Not the process, but oh yeah, adversity training. Adversity training is something that is not very popular because it's out of the comfort zone. I will get back to out of the comfort zone after the break. But during the break, think about a comment or a topic that you really liked hearing about in this this session. Just let me know if you need to have a little bit more elaboration on it. Thank you. We'll be right back. Tiago?
Yes, Dave, I am here. Okay, in 5 minutes we will return. Thank you.
Okay, 5 minutes. See you in 5 minutes.
Okay, Dave, we have here 2 questions for you. I will put for you C. Okay.
Okay, let me
Thanks.
see. All right, here we go. Tiago, can you remind me, because we talked about a lot of things during the break, and I kind of forgot what I promised that I would come back to. Do you still remember, or does the in the chat remember what I said? I was going to elaborate more, but then Christina said, let's go to break and we get back to it. But I admit, I forgot what I was going to come back to. Do you remember?
I don't remember.
I talked about adversity training, but then
Yes.
something else came up.
I only remember this, Dave.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe in a few minutes you will remember. Maybe.
Yes. Well, because I mean, it's fatigue, guys. Hey, I'm a human being. Hey, fantastic,
Okay.
huh? I will answer the question of Ricardo. Okay, what's the biggest mental block? Well, the most common and biggest mental block is I'm not good enough. And this is very common, but it's a big one. And it can be prevented, of course, if you are raised by good parents and you have good coaches and you get constructive criticism instead of beat down criticism. And I am the athlete that I'm thinking of, that I work with right now. I would never have imagined that he thought he was not good enough. This person for me is the most talented person that I've ever worked with, and amazing human being. And to find out that that was a core reason why actually good things were not coming to him. Because if you're walking around and you're not good enough, then you're not open to receive, you're not looking for sponsors, you're not expecting people to give you anything because you're not good enough and you'll never be good enough. And you're not even worthy of the gold, you're not worthy of the expensive car that you drive, or you're not worthy of my coaching even. I mean, even got to a point there that the performance suffered so much that all my efforts were like, oh, I feel so ashamed. You work so hard and I'm not deserving, I'm not good enough. And if you say this, how many times did I say it right now? Just in this session, I say I'm not good enough. But if you have a negative thought, I would like to share with everybody in the audience right now, a negative thought spoken has traveled through your brain 1,600 times already. It's such a fickle thing. So if you don't stop it, if you don't learn to replace that, this is actually a ridiculous thing, that we actually prevented it from going all the way back, because at that time it was also time for him to become a father. And I used that. I had explained, I say, hey, look at this baby, you know, you're a father now. You really think that he should feel that he's not good enough? Or do you think that he came to this planet thinking that he's not good enough? Or he's good the way he is, just the way he is? And of course he loved looking at his boy. And yeah, he said, I cannot imagine why I think that I'm not good enough. Well, the very fact that I was born, you know, I was chosen to be born. I mean, I'm here, you know, I've got to be good enough. I was good enough and I've done amazing things. So the focus started to change on a very emotional level. And when we started to address the illogicalness of I'm not good enough and the fear that it all kind of produced, and all of a sudden, we started working on speech patterns, body language, because body language, if a person doesn't feel good enough, there's a certain body language they portray. And we're still animals. Human beings react to how the person is. If a person is walking real confident, you know, well, the people usually don't mess with that person. Or people are very outspoken, very articulate, you know, they assume that that person is very intelligent. If you stutter, it's a false assumption, but if you stutter, people assume that you're not very smart. Again, it's a false assumption. But if you're walking around with this self-imposed idea that you're not good enough, and that blockage remains, then it doesn't matter how talented you are or how hard you work, you're always going to get the least amount of success instead of the most amount of success. So we actually overcame it by addressing the emotions, and there was nothing clinical because there was nothing wrong in his life. He was very successful. He was making very good salary, and he was happy, but he never felt really deserving. And it was showing in certain moments where, yeah, he could have won the match, but he just didn't feel like he deserved it. And that's why he didn't give it all his talent and all his skills. I hope that answered your question, Ricardo. Now let me go to João's question. What are the consequences of the pandemic on the minds of athletes who cannot compete? Thank you, João, for asking that, because in this current situation, this is hugely important, of course. This is also one of the reasons why Rolo Mental Coaching, normally we offer an intake for a certain amount of money. 30 minutes would be $150. But now we're offering that for free when you sign up through our contact page, rolomentalcoaching.com. You can sign up now with a free consult with one of us if you schedule. We will ask you to read our business flyer, just so we don't talk about us, we talk about you, and that you get to use your session to the way you would like to use it. And we are dealing with our athletes right now, which we cannot personally coach right now. We're doing online work, which has been very successful, and they feel very supported by weekly sessions to maintain the work that we've been doing, but also dealing with depressions that are starting, of a sense of purposelessness, that they feel like no purpose. I mean, I'm training, but I mean, there's no competition. How do you keep a competitive mind? Well, think about it this way. If you're an athlete, you are always an athlete. I mean, that's why retired athletes are amazing businessmen sometimes, also because, or businesswomen, excuse me, but there is a competitor in an athlete. And I say, well, the wolf wants to eat, so feed him something. For now, get the competitive nature out of other things, you know, or get your creativism going. Focus on being creative. I even had a client, he's starting to write a book. And other one is starting to paint, and really paint, like taking painting lessons and becoming really good at it. And he's probably going to be an artist also after he's done playing. So it's also learning to see that your talent is not just a gymnast. You're not just a tennis player. You're a person with a talent that also produces great tennis. But that talent is a root of something else, because I sometimes get asked, Dave, why didn't you become a tennis player since you're so passionate about tennis? Well, I tell them honestly, I say, when I was a young kid, my parents didn't have a lot of money. They could afford basketball shoes and a basketball. Tennis is an expensive sport. So my parents said, nope, not going to happen. So I had to play basketball. But I believe if I've had the same dedication and the same hard work, my talent as an athlete would have helped me be a great tennis player. I'm not going to say that I would be a top 100 player, but I would be a great tennis player. Because of my work ethic, my discipline, and my patience in the process, I already had great coaches that helped me with technique. I had a aptitude for learning things really fast, and that's a common denominator with high performance athletes. It's lovely to work. We are very privileged, Christina and I, to work with these amazing people, because when they get a tool, when they understand the process, they immediately start enjoying it. It's like getting new tennis rackets that you've always wanted, or if you're a soccer player, you finally get those shoes that Ronaldo has, and a fantastic light but super strong, and you can curve the ball like anybody. So when you get the tools and you start applying them, you can make the competitive nature within yourself. You can work towards what drives you, really investigate, but do it out of your comfort. Tiago, you're right. It just jumped in my mind. Out of your comfort zone. I'll get back to that. So João, to answer your question, it's really sad that this is happening to all these amazing people that are doing, but not just athletes, also some people that lost their jobs. Their competitiveness was their bread and butter. They lost their jobs. Their business have failed. So it's not such a huge problem that we're now not allowed to play competition. We just be patient and find the resilience to get out of your comfort zone and find the competition somewhere else. Go do things creatively. Write a book. My daughter has written a book, and she published a book in this COVID period, and I think it's up for an award because it deals with diversity and anti-bullying, which is a big issue in schools right now. So, and she's 13 years old. So I would challenge you, João, if it's really a challenge, find it through creativeness. And if you need, you can ask for support. You can sign up for a free consult, and we can talk about this personally. Now back to what I said. Tiago didn't remember, I didn't remember, but it just popped in my mind because before the break I started talking about adversity training. Adversity training is obviously something that you don't like. Like yesterday, we had a technical difficulty and Christina wasn't able to really do what she planned to do, but she dealt with it and we grinded it through, and it ended up working because we still had amazing questions after the session. But that's out of your comfort zone. But what we ask our clients to do, to also choose and select situations where they're normally not comfortable doing, to go ahead and do that. Because you're a public figure sometimes, you are a famous person, but you cannot do an interview. You only answer questions with yes and no. Well, that's not going to happen. So we do media training. We do all kinds of things so you can be in your comfort zone, what formerly was out of your comfort zone. If you're now struggling during the COVID crisis, which is obviously out of your comfort zone, because it's no cakewalk right now. Everybody's having a tough time. But to mention to you, for our clients, everything's fine. They're doing fine. They're suffering. They're having difficulty, but they translated their current position. They have acknowledged and accepted that it's the way it is right now and what's within their control. Okay, they can work on their routines, the morning routines, waking up early still, doing their crunches, going for a run, if that's allowed in your neighborhood. Make yourself that meal that is really important for you to have. Watch your diet. Don't overeat in this period. Make sure especially if you're a tennis player, all your tendons and all your ligaments are the same as you would do in a competition. There's certain techniques that they do to maintain tension on the muscles. So find yourself out of your comfort zone when you feel like, oh, this is just too hard. Well, hey, that should be an alarm bell for you. Oh, this is exactly what I need. When I needed to learn to understand Portuguese, because I'm married to a Portuguese woman where the whole family only speaks Portuguese. Oh, I really enjoy having to learn Portuguese at age 32. But there was a need. I got out of my comfort zone and I decided to learn 5 words a day and use them in a sentence, talking to a complete stranger sometimes, and let them correct me. And I was out of my comfort zone for 3 months, but after 3 months, I was starting to get a conversation going. Now I understand Portuguese, and I can actually carry a conversation in Portuguese. I wouldn't say that I'm perfect at it. My daughter used to hate my American accent in Portuguese, but I'm trying to tell you that this was definitely not a language that I mastered, but it's dedication, discipline, And in the end, when you are brave enough to get out of your comfort zone and new areas that are affiliated to your talent, to your discipline, and to your patience in the process, then you might actually find very new angles and new aspects of yourself that are going to contribute to when you can compete, that can produce confidence, because you were able to survive this. You were able to find new strategy to stay motivated, to be inspired, to be inspiring for other people. Wow. When you start competition again, you'll be like, all right, and I can play tennis, and I'm a great soccer player. Not just I'm a tennis player. You're not just that one thing. You are a human being that does something special.
We reached the 10 o'clock. I would like, if possible, if you can hear me, I would like to finalize before Tiago concludes the workshop. We wanted to address the questions that we really appreciated from the participants.
Yes.
And give Dave a chance to share the knowledge and experiences he had. And therefore, due to time limitations, some of the exercises from the book that we plan on sharing, which we touched a little bit yesterday.
Do you know what? That I promised that I was going to explain bounce hit a little bit more. Tiago, do we still have like 5 minutes? Can I?
Yes, Dave, you have more 5 minutes, no problem.
Okay, then because I did promise, and it's one of the exercises in the book that was based on Timothy Galloway's work on Self 1, Self 2, to really see the ball. He left it off at the bounce hit, which at high performance, it's not enough. You will see the ball too late. So we added another dimension where we started working with rhythm, breathing, footwork, and for the tennis coaches and tennis players out there, the origin point where this process starts is from the opponent's blade. The opponent will hit the ball, and usually technical coaches with footwork will say bounce or do something or split step on the moment of hit. We ask them to do a puff of air to register that the ball has been hit. Well, you can only register if you have seen it. So that already links the eye and the coordination with the hand. Your brain or your cerebellum is aware that there's a ball coming at you at lightning speed, of course. Everything what I'm just saying, this process goes lightning quick through the brain and your cerebellum. But then when the ball crosses and the ball bounces, we ask our players to exaggerate look, not just with the eyes, but exaggerate look. You know, if you're hitting it back, and turn the head, you know, don't just turn your eyes, turn the head. And exaggerate when the ball is close to you. You see the ball, there is the ball, and strike through the ball. Of course, you start slow. You take two players, they hit the ball to each other. And then you ask them in the beginning to register. So you as coach can hear, do they have the timing correct? So you hear, at first you would ask them to say bounce when the ball bounces. And when they are supposed to have the hitting point in the right moment, they're supposed to say hit. That's for you, coach, to see if the timing is correct. I mean, you can probably see that also through to technical, but for them to register and get timing correct from the other player's blade, it gives the Self 2 a huge comfort to be able to register that the ball actually is coming already. And actually, the players will register to you. Actually, they feel they have more time. And then when you speed things up, we don't want them to talk no more. We don't want them to say anything no more. But the breathing still needs to be audible. I usually tell the players, I can't hear you. I want to hear you. Hit through the ball. Like a boxer. When a boxer throws a punch, it's always, you know. And when you exhale on your hit, you can never have the catapult effect. Because I see sometimes ITF players, the first ball, and they're not breathing. And then the fourth ball is low in the net. I'm like, well, what do you think is going to happen? You're out of air. You have no more energy. Because oxygen is very powerful energy, and we need it a lot. If we don't do it, the next 23 seconds, it's really scary sometimes. So my promise to you, that is the bounce hit in a nutshell explained. Of course, if you're interested in more of these tools, go, if you're from Portugal, to amazon.es, Spain, and search for mental training in tennis, practical strategies for success. There it's available for Portugal. If you are in other regions, Holland, for example, you need to get it in Amazon Germany. If you're in the UK, Amazon UK, or the US, amazon.com. I've tried to provide a link in the chat, but it's not allowing me for some reason. Hopefully later we can get it to you. But you can also go, if you're having trouble finding the correct link, on our website, rollomentalcoaching.com. You go to the book section, there's all the links to the respective Amazon sites where you can acquire the book if you're interested to have the tools, the off-court tools and the on-court tools.
And the free consult.
And if you want, you can sign up for a free consult during COVID period, because if the COVID crisis is done, we're out of here. We're traveling again. Thank you so much, organizers. Thank you for the sponsoring. Thank you for having this opportunity to reach out to all these people. And hopefully in the future, we can pick some different topics if there's more questions from the organizers and from the public.
So I'd like to say grazie and
Evcharisto.
And thank you and obrigado. And I look forward for the next opportunity that we can share experiences together.
Back to you, Tiago.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Christina. We will send an email with your contact to all the people.
Yes.
And thanks a lot for this evening. And thanks to everyone that stay with us, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes. Okay. Last one.
It just proves, like, because we had some trouble yesterday, please remember, it doesn't matter how you start, it's how you finish. And I believe
Yes.
the organizers and us and the public and the questions coming from the audience, amazing job, guys. I mean, I really enjoyed this session. So it's really how you finish, guys. Fantastic.
Thanks, Dave. Obrigado. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.